Joining us now, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard and Mark Polymeropoulos, former CIA chief of operations in Europe and Eurasia and an MSNBC national security and intelligence analyst. So, Vaughn, just days ago, Trump said Putin had gone absolutely crazy. Russia questioned whether Trump was suffering from emotional overload. What do we know about this, first of all, potential prisoner exchange, but in general, the White House approach to Russia right now?
Right. We are still waiting for confirmation from the White House or State Department about this purported prisoner exchange between the United States and Russia. As you noted, this would be a new deal, one in which could signal continued cooperation between Russia and the United States, an open line of communication at a time in which there are serious questions about greater peace negotiation between Russia and Ukraine going forward. For their own part, there is still underway several hundred Russian and Ukraine prisoners that are currently being swapped here over the course of this weekend. But there are no official talks on the books. Russia had suggested that potentially there could be negotiations at the Vatican, but they said that they would not agree to that as a venue. Keith Kellogg, the special envoy to Russia and Ukraine for this White House, suggested the talks could take place in Geneva instead. But so far, Putin has not agreed to meet face-to-face with Zelensky. And this comes after 4 days of more than 100 missile strikes inside of Ukraine. In a social media post just in the last few minutes, President Trump again calling out explicitly President Putin, saying that he doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. In that post, threatening the president of Russia, though with unspecified whether that would be sanctions or further military cooperation between the U.S. and Ukraine, but acknowledging in that social media post, notably, Chris, that the U.S. could have made the circumstances for Russia much more difficult over the last months. I will note that 3 months ago, I had a conversation with a senior administration official at this White House who had suggested that a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine was just 1 or 2 months away. We are now 1 month past that. So still, there are a lot of questions about whether Russia is really willing to cooperate and bring this war to an end, Chris.
Well, Mark, obviously, Donald Trump has been increasingly public about his frustration with Putin and the lack of progress on a peace deal, although saying really bad things could happen is another level. Europe hasn't been waiting on Washington. Last week, the EU announced the new sanctions on Russia. Germany just lifted all range restrictions on the weapons it gives Ukraine. In your view, what is this relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and what's Trump getting at now?
Well, Chris, it's kind of ironic because in the last Truth Social post, Donald Trump almost admits to having helped Russia previously. It's quite remarkable saying that, well, you know, bad things could happen. Well, bad things should have been happening, such as sanctions, such as weapons flows to the Ukrainians, and they have not. And really, you know, the world is watching to see if Donald Trump is ever going to get tough with Putin, something that he's not seemingly wanted to do previously. You know, there's a sanctions package sitting in the Senate that apparently is veto-proof that would put 500% tariffs on countries that essentially trade in Russian oil and gas. There's also the possibility of more weapon shipments. We could allow the Europeans to transfer kind of U.S. kit to the Ukrainians. We could actually sell weapons to the Ukrainians as well. But all of this is just right now just a little bit tougher talk from Trump, but he hasn't done anything yet. And one of the things, Chris, I think we should understand is there's a lot of GOP angst over this. There are hawks within the Republican Party. Do they really want to be complicit in what is happening now, this inaction and watching Ukraine just getting pounded day after day?
And The Economist, Mark, is reporting on a change in Russia's war strategy. Quote, a year ago, for 30 drones to strike Ukraine in a single night would be exceptional. Now Russia is saturating Ukraine's air defenses with hundreds of them. On Sunday, 298 drones and 69 missiles were fired into Ukraine. Ukraine says it has documents suggesting Russia intends to ramp up its drone production to 500 a day from 300 a month ago. Or a year ago. How long can Ukraine continue to defend against this? And I mean, from a war standpoint, how urgent is it if Trump is going to do something to do it fast?
Well, right, Chris, and it's all about air defense right now. So what would help Ukraine tremendously is additional Patriot missile systems. This is the air defense system that has been extremely effective. They're running very low on this. The U.S. is reluctant to provide more. The Pentagon certainly believes they need them for the Indo-Pacific. Some of our allies have them, and they've been reluctant as well to transfer them. But it could be done if we deem it a necessity. And this would help in what is these attacks, not only, of course, by these drones, the Shahed drones, but also ballistic missiles as well. Now, on the battlefield itself, we don't see large swaths of territory being lost. The Russians are making some moves. The Ukrainians have been really ingenious in producing their own short-range drones, which, in essence, allow for the lines to be stable. But this has a lot to do right now with just, in essence, terrorism. This is Russian attacks on Ukrainian civilians. It is terrible for morale. In terms of the battlefield itself, I don't think as important. But again, the Ukrainians need U.S. kit. They need Europeans to step up. If there's any time where you need, sanctions to the max and arming Ukraine to the teeth, it's right now.
I mean, you mentioned ballistic missiles in addition to the drones, many of those ballistic missiles from North Korea. And there's this new generation of drones that it relies on AI, not GPS, and that makes them immune to jamming and other electronic warfare, as I understand it. At least that's what Ukrainian engineers say. The war today is being fought differently, right? It's a different war from the one that started 3 years ago. What does that mean?
Well, it's absolutely remarkable. There's so much kind of in the national security world that is being discussed on this, is how the nature of warfare has changed. Again, drones are basically everything. And as I just mentioned before, the Ukrainians' ability to indigenously produce these short-range drones has proved very effective. Of course, the Russians are very adept at using the drones as well. Chris, the U.S. military is looking at this very, very closely because, the future of warfare is being fought on a land war in Europe, and everyone is learning lessons. And don't forget, what the U.S., the National Defense Strategy always looks at is a future war with China over Taiwan. So many lessons are being learned on the battlefields of Europe.
Mark Polymeropoulos, thank you.